So in the meantime, I just have to say that I'm still, the voice of Rabbi Rosen is still ringing in my ears about facing truth in community, because that sounds like a very simple idea, but one that is particularly an observation that seemed particularly important for the kind of cataclysmic nature of the threats that we're talking about. So my question to, and I think by community, we're representative and involved with so many different communities here, but this conference is really an invitation to New York's diverse faith communities. So my question to each of you is, you know, we face many truths out there. There's the truth of the fact that we have a presidential election in 26 days. Although actually it's a lot fewer days for us in New York, because every single one of us are going to be out there on October the 24th, if we are able to, going to a poll and doing our voting. There's the truth we have a mayoral election in 2021. There's the truth that we were supposed to have congestion pricing. I was really relying on that to get, you know, my teenagers out of the habit of being driven to school, and that didn't happen. There was the truth that we were supposed to have, you know, no more plastic bags. Like that went the way of COVID disaster. There are both big truths and small truths, and they are all true. So my question to the panelists is, what is the truth that you think is most important to address at this moment in community, the communities of diversity and interfaith involvement here in this conference? If you had to pick one, just, you know.
You might have to call on us. I was gonna.
No.
I was gonna defer to
I'll speak at once.
I would defer to Peggy if you have something first.
Well, I think the truth is that communities are ready to tell their story, they're ready to be activated, and they simply need support. I find that when we can provide even minimal support, and even whether it's space, whether it's some sort of resources, whether it's training, whether it's information, that residents can take that and run with it, tell their stories, be able to articulate their concerns, and we just need to provide them more support. And I'm hoping that with the impetus of the racial reckoning, that philanthropy and government will begin to invest more in the most underserved communities, because people know what their needs are, they have their concerns, and we simply need to give them some resources to help address those concerns. And of course, we've got to vote. We have got to exert our political power. I think we're in a moment that's coming up in the next few weeks, but we also have a moment next year when we will have all of our citywide offices will be up. 75% of our city council is up. So we really have a chance to make our voices heard, to really support progressive candidates who are going to support what we need in our communities. So to me, that is a truth, that there is a racial reckoning, that our communities can tell their stories, they can be part of the solution for sustainability, and we simply need to provide them with the resources and the capacity to do so.
I would say, for me, the truth that we need to face in community is how urgent this is in terms of emissions reductions, that actually we have, so many people don't realize. I feel like this is snuck up on many people, and it is really shocking. to look at the truth, which is that, you know, the choice is between getting to net zero carbon emissions or perpetually rising temperatures to the point of the Earth being uninhabitable for human beings. So we know we have to get to net zero emissions. If we do it pretty soon, we can stay at 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial averages, probably 2 if we did it immediately. And if we continue to delay, we're going to stay wherever it is that we are when we finally get there. And whatever tipping points we've crossed, whatever feedback loops we've triggered is going to be part of that. And so the urgency is such that I feel like it's very difficult for people to sit with the loss that we know that we already have incurred, and the sense of anger at the people that would continue to perpetuate the misinformation that is delaying us. I think that sitting in community, and particularly with the benefit of those who draw from faith and wisdom, ancestral wisdom traditions, is that we can process that through those difficult emotions and have a kind of resolve and clarity where we act, as opposed to kind of letting it spin in a direction that won't be productive. So that's my truth.
I think similar to my fellow panelists, there's clearly a truth in the crisis we face and the need to come together to do something about it. And I think there's been this raging debate of, is it personal action? Is it the things I need to do in my life? Or is it political action and systemic change? And I've always clearly thought it's both. And the things we do in our own lives has that triggering impact out on others. And we, those of us who take action and are able to, and are in some cases privileged to be able to take action on our own lives, can help send a message. But that also, when you're willing and able to do those things, I think it opens you up more to the need for the systemic changes that are absolutely at the heart of how we're going to confront this crisis. Because the personal behavior changes aren't going to be enough ever. It really is the big changes, the policy, the systems, the interconnected systems of our inequality and climate crisis that need to be addressed together. And then we can build the political support to do those big things when you see people willing to take those sacrifices or make those changes for a better future in their own lives. I think there's a lot to that in this moment. And, one of the biggest things, and it's been said a few times on here, voting is one of those biggest and most important things you can do in your own life to send a message. Vote on climate, vote on the environment, vote on the issues that impact your neighbors and and the nature surrounding your communities and your air quality. It's also critically important. It is also critically important in order to deal with the challenges we face as a nation and the degradation in our democracy that's happening right now, that we're willing to take those actions together and aggregate up all of our individual actions into something that's really transformative to push for that systemic change.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to call on Owl, who did our prayer this morning. Owl, hold on. I'm going to put you. There you are.
I did it. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a question, particularly for Ms. Peggy Shepard, regarding the concept of environmentalism as being, for lack of a better word, to say a white movement. And I think your talk did a really good job of showing other voices and how important they are towards environmentalism. And my mentor, Dr. Gustav Jackson from Guyana, brought up these issues to me. So I just wanted to know, even historically, what you see in terms of the role of other people in terms of the development of environmentalism and the environmental movement.
When you say the involvement of other people, could you be a little more specific?
I would say people of African American descent in particular, but I mean other groups as well, perhaps Latinos, and then again, I think your talk brought this up as well. There's what do the millennials say? Intersectionality. I mean, you know, a lot of people that we would say classify as Hispanic or Latino are actually also indigenous as well, and Black too. So
No,
I mean, it's open.
well, I would say that perhaps one of the unique factors of the national environmental justice movement over the last 3 decades has been that it is multiracial. We have the Indigenous Environmental Network, the Asian Pacific Environmental Network out in Oakland. We have networks throughout the South and Gulf Coast states. We have Green Latinos. We have the National Black Environmental Justice Network. And for the most part, these networks get together, they know each other. We work on federal policy issues together. And so it really is multiracial, multi-ethnic. And now, even though we have been in a fairly separate movement from the green environmental movement that started in 1970, we are now coming together because the large mainstream green organizations realize that they cannot achieve the kind of climate change legislation and policies they need without everyone, without the public, and without the communities most affected by pollution weighing in on these issues. Sometimes there are solutions that are developed that we believe will hurt communities of color and indigenous communities. And yet our voices have not always been included when larger groups are developing policies. And that is beginning to change. I think COVID-19 has put a spotlight on the health inequities and health disparities that have been exacerbated by COVID-19, exacerbated by air pollution. You know, Harvard study has just shown that the communities that are most impacted by air pollution are the ones that have also had higher mortality and morbidity from COVID-19. So there is now a reckoning within the environmental movement of diversifying their staffs and their boards. Most of them now have strategic plans for diversity. Most of them are trying to develop partnerships with more affected communities. And we're now beginning to work together on climate and environmental policy. And I believe that there is a strong faith-based reconciliation that could be happening. I believe that there are, you know, suburban white congregations that could be holding combined efforts, combined meetings with people of color congregations. I believe that white suburban congregations could also be looking at key issues that Black Lives Matter and other communities of color have raised, whether it's prison reform or segregated schools or the lack of affordable housing. Congregations can begin to choose an issue that is of importance to the broader people of color community and work together on some of those issues.
There was I'm sorry if I could just jump in for a moment to the panel. This is Henry, Chloe's colleague. There was a fantastic question in the chat. Oh, there I am. Okay. I just was going to read a question in the chat, which is a perfect follow-up to this. And in fact, Ms. Shepard, you already started to address some of this. Jackie Ebner asked from the chat for Peggy Shepard, and I would, you know, extend this to all of our panelists. As part of an interfaith climate action organization, we've been struggling with how to engage with and support faith communities of color, especially amidst the current Black Lives Matter crisis. How would you suggest we move a predominantly white suburban organization to be more inclusive and diverse? Right, so you just, Ms. Shepard, you were just saying a moment ago, like the importance of reaching out across these lines, but like what are the, you know, practical steps that a predominantly white environmental organization might take to build partnerships and build solidarity with faith communities of color or other impacted communities of color. And I would love to actually have all the panelists comment on that, but Peggy first.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think that I think I've heard that on Sunday is the most segregated day of the week in terms of the faith community. I have a former staff person who lives upstate, and she, very religious, was engaged in a white congregation, and after years finally left that congregation because she felt that there was no way for her to have her voice and her story told in a way that people were really listening in a really unbiased way. And so she actually left the church that she had been, a part of, and a very, very engaged part of for so many years. And what I think needs to happen is to partner with other congregations that are people of color congregations, begin to have combined meetings, begin to have combined events, maybe have a day of worship together, and really figure out what are the issues and the concerns that you all can begin to address together. The main thing is beginning a dialogue so that everyone begins to understand each other's concerns. That to me is a good first step.
We have a question from Nancy Lawrence. The Environmental Voter Project was started because the founder discovered that shockingly only about 5% of people who identify with environmental concerns vote. His goal is to increase that by informing people who sign up of voting at all levels, city, state, council, et cetera. Green Faith is also working on voter suppression. So environmental faith concerns and voting.
Sorry, what was the question?
The question I think was that actually, it sounds like it's slightly more of a statement. So I guess the Environmental Voter Project, Green Faith, how are these groups working? How are they kind of in the mix right now as we are in I guess an election moment and moving forward?
Well, I would say, first of all, hi, Nancy. It's great to hear from you. And Nancy Lawrence is a great leader from the Metro Catholic Climate Movement and friend and colleague. That is a really good point, that people, the extent to which there is political will. I mean, we always hear about this problem. We have everything that it takes now to actually solve this, with the technology, with the economic plans, and what's lacking is political will to really confront and face and deal with the climate crisis. And the truth is, with political will, there is so much more of it than actually gets reflected in who votes and in actually, what legislation gets proposed and passed, and then how that legislation is implemented. Because there's so many interest groups in the way of that. And I think we have to realize that this system has so much entrenched money and power. It's like legacy money and power. It's going to go away. It's definitely going to go away, the fossil fuel industry in particular. But the question is, how much damage will they do? How much more damage are we going to do before we finally get through this? And there are lobbyists working so hard, and advertising firms, and so hard. And so in order to counter that, we all have to dig deeper and come together more. And voting is, of course, the most important way to do that. So I would say that I can't name every group that's working well in this space, but I know there are, with Green Faith, with Interfaith Power and Light, with Parliament of the World's Religions. These are interfaith groups that I'm aware of that do great work. And then there are these faith-specific groups that are environmentally focused. There are so many. Interfaith Power and Light is doing a voter challenge right now, and on the Center for Earth Ethics website, we feature that. Of course, you can go on their website too. So I just wanted to also say about the conversation before that I think it is so important. At Center for Earth Ethics, we do ministers trainings, an annual ministers training for ministry in the time of climate crisis. And it is very striking that what makes that a successful gathering and group is to have it be very full of voices from Black, Indigenous, people of color, faith leaders. And so I'm not saying that to pat ourselves on the back. In fact, it is just by virtue of the legacy that Union Theological Seminary has, being sort of the home of Black liberation theology professor James Cone, and the network of allies that we have that are able to reach out like that. But I would just say to those congregations and to the questioner who was asking about how to engage, to really reach out and try, because it is the wisdom and the knowledge and the strength and insight and experience that comes from those faith traditions in particular is so powerful to solve, to confront this crisis. And I put in the chat someone who I met in that process, who came to one of our ministers' trainings, and then I've since, invited to be a speaker in various places. Ambrose Carroll, who's based in California and has an organization called Green the Church, which is at the intersection of the Black church and the environmental movement, and has some ideas about how to make this a more accessible and easy exchange, for that vision of having these voices come together more. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, this is gonna be the last question. I'm gonna direct it at Daniel Zarrilli. You, again, to give us a note of challenge and also a note of hope, where we are in 2020, in the time between when the document was written and where we need to go. What is looking to you in New York City, like where are our greatest challenges in meeting those 2050 goals, and where are our best successes in moving towards them?
Great, thank you. I want to make one point on the prior question too, and just the issue of being an environmental voter and what that might mean. And it strikes me that we too often sort of pigeonhole the idea of environmental voting as like a niche little sort of climate as a niche environmental concern, when it really is such an all society issue. And the idea that if your concerns are around housing, you're a climate voter. If your issues are on health or poverty or national security, whatever it might be, like all these issues are combined under this umbrella of, the risks we face from climate, the risks we're already facing from inequality. It really is, I think we all need to do a different job of describing what it means to care about the environment, because we are one in the environment, right? We live in a biosphere, in an atmosphere, and all these issues come to connect there. I think there's a broadening of that that's really necessary. Not to sidestep your question. So on the question of OneNYC, so we laid out in April 2019 an action plan, a long-term vision for where we're heading as a city. Of course, in the meantime, we've just been thrown some massive curveballs in the form of a global pandemic and an economic crisis. But it is clear that we can't lose sight of the ball here. We need to make sure that our eyes are focused on the long-term needs of the city. There, of course, have been some well-publicized budgetary cuts around some of our zero waste goals that are a short-term hit and really unfortunate, but a reality of the budget situation we're facing. But there is so much more that's actually moving forward and accelerating at this point. And I think some of the transformative things we're doing on divestment and making sure that by the end of this year, we will have that actionable plan to move our money away from fossil fuels and into climate solutions is something that is just fundamental to being able to deliver on the larger goals. our local law 97, the building retrofits law, is still very much, the deadlines are in effect. The jobs will be created because building owners need to comply with the greenhouse gas emission reductions that are coming, that are needed in order to hit those targets in 2024, in 2030, and beyond. So there are certainly some short-term challenges in the budget, but the long-term outlook and the policy change, the systemic change that's coming from some of the bigger things that we've put into place with legislation, also with the state's legislation on the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act to achieve 100% clean electricity. There continues to be movement on offshore wind, on securing more solar and hydropower into the city, that we are very much still on track with the larger goals, but on a few things, certainly there are some near-term challenges that we need to be able to get past quickly and resume work on.
Well, thank you all so much for a really extraordinary discussion that has just set us off. And we'll be doing at least a follow-up email usually after these conferences. So please, if you think of things afterwards that you would have liked to have shared in terms of resources, Peggy, I noticed that you have a WEAC Gala coming up. I'm sure there are other things that other people have, like please send them to myself or Hanetti, and we'll try to share this with the group. So thank you. And I will now turn this back over to Hanetti.